I'm a Kinsey Institute Global Ambassador, and thank you for attending tonight. Has anybody ever seen me speak before? Forget it, I'm going on. But you've never seen a presentation. You've just seen me when we came in here last time, right? Yeah, I didn't tell you too much. Okay. Now you got the good thing. But it is a shortened version, a little bit about what I do and the work that I do. As I said, I am a Kinsey Institute Global Ambassador. Every 5, 6, 7 months, I put together a new PowerPoint presentation to help people understand what it means to be transgender. I literally just flew in from South Africa to England on Tuesday night, and then I spent one night at home in England, and I flew back in here on yesterday. So I'm a little brain dead, so I apologize for any confusion if I say anything wrong, all right? I am a bit of an open speaker. I swear a little bit, okay? And I talk openly. Does that offend anybody if I swear? Seriously? Nobody has a problem?
Yep.
All right. Okay, so I just want to make sure, right? I don't have a foul mouth, but like I said, I do swear here and there because it does show emotion. And as I said, my name is Jessica Lynn. Every 6 months together, I put a new PowerPoint. This one we call Turn the Page. And I absolutely love what the turn the page means. The next chapter doesn't begin until you turn the page. I love that statement, you know? So I have a question for you guys today. Think back on some questions you may have been asked today. You may have stopped by the shop on the way here and been asked cash or card. Think about that. You could have been at the cafe on the way here and been asked to choose between tea or coffee. You choose tea because you don't want caffeine to keep you up all night and you have to sit there and listen to me for a couple hours or whatever, right? Think about these things. None of us tend to dwell on these type of decisions, nor do we remember them much longer. There are, however, some questions that do seem more important, more essential to who you are. When you go to vote, are you voting conservative or liberal? Think about this. Do you vote the same every single time? Sorry, I went one step ahead. How about, do you have a favorite sports team? Do you have a favorite sport? Anybody have a favorite sport in this room? These are some of the questions. Right? You have a favorite sport?
Yeah.
What's that?
Jogging.
Jogging, okay. How about you guys? Who here is a rugby fan? We're in where are we? We're in Poland. Football, right? So, all right. How about a favorite sports team? Who here is a City fan, right? Fuck you guys if you are. I'm an Aston Villa fan in England, right? Going back further when you're a kid, the really, really, really important questions. Batman or Superman? Think about this. How about your favorite dinosaur? Do you guys have a favorite dinosaur? All right. How about a favorite doll? Did you guys have a favorite doll? Right? How about a favorite color? Did you guys have a favorite color? Do you remember some of these questions? Do you remember some of these questions? Now let's go back to the very, very beginning. The very first question that is ever asked of you. The very first question. Boy or girl? That is the very first question. In 1965, the year I was born, my mom and dad had to wait till I came out of the womb before they could identify me, boy or girl. Nowadays, you know, your parents, you guys are much, much younger than me. Your parents probably knew what they were going to have before you were born. Think about that. Before you entered this world, you had an entire wardrobe that was picked out for you to match your genitalia. Your bedrooms were painted either pink or blue. Your dad probably sat in the waiting room like I did, holding a football, waiting to have a son because you knew you had a son coming, right? This isn't to say that gender is a choice like tea or coffee. It's something that you and only you can decide for yourself, right? Think about this. But before you've taken your first breath on this planet, somebody has made that decision for you. From that very first breath, most of your life choices have been chosen for you just because of the genitalia you're born with. Now think about this. For half the world's population, when you are born, they stamp female on your birth certificate. They stamp female on your birth certificate because of the genitalia. Your toys are chosen for you, the friends you play with, the color of your bedrooms, and in some parts of the world, who you're going to marry. Your whole life has already been decided for you before you can take your first steps or stay your first complete sentence. Think about that. You know what I'm talking about. Now, for the other half of you, when you're born, they stamp male on your birth certificate. You're taught from the earliest you can remember how to be strong, kick a football, throw a baseball, that you are the dominant of the genders. Your whole life has been laid out for you. How are you going to live? How are you going to dress? And what kind of life is expected of you? Now think about this for a few moments. What if the doctor that delivered you, the nurse that did the ultrasound on your mom, your dad, everybody, every single person made a mistake in identifying you when you were born? Think about that for one moment. How would you feel? How would you feel if they misidentified you when you were born? That makes up approximately 0.5 to 1% of the world's population. That is roughly 80 million people worldwide identify as transgender. Boys look in the mirror, are not comfortable being boys. They want to be a girl. Some girls look in the mirror, they want to live life as a boy. Some people don't identify as either gender. This is what we call being transgender. And a study has found that most gender dysphoria is established by age 7. This one came out of Cedars-Sinai in the United States, that 73% of transgender women and 78% of transgender men first experience gender dysphoria by the age of 7. Think about that. But society has been saying for generations, the television, especially right-wing media, that says children aren't old enough to know their gender identity. Well, that is an absolute load of bullshit. Kids do know. Not all, like I said, 73% of transgender women and 78% of transgender men know by the time they're roughly 4, 5, 6 years old. This study came out of the American Academy of Pediatrics that says around age 2, children become conscious of the physical differences between boys and girls. Before their 3rd birthday, children can label themselves either a boy or girl, most children. And by age 4, most children have a stable sense of their gender identity. This study came out of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And when I Googled this, these were just a few of them that popped up. There's studies out of Harvard, out of Stanford, at a unit everywhere. There's so many research that says that most children know by the age of 4 to 5 years old. Not all, most, okay? Because some people do not know until later in life. I have friends that had no idea until 40, 50 years old. But I'm telling you that most children do know. But as you know, society for years and years and years says gender identity, nature versus nurture. And it has long been believed by the scientific community that gender identity as a child was determined by the child's upbringing, surrounding environment, and the way the child was treated during growth. And this was most specifically in the 1960s when Dr. John Money published his John Jones case. All right, you guys are familiar with Dr. John Money? I'm sure you are, right? Dr. John Money told the world he was considered one of the best psychologists on transgender issues, and he convinced the world that gender imprinting did not start in an infant until the first year and continually advanced significantly by age 3 or 4. Think about this. He convinced the world that it's the way you raise a child, and he literally did, right? That gender was learned rather than innate. Dr. John Money's very, very famous for these 2 little boys. These 2 boys were born in 1965, a few months after I was. They were born David, Bruce, and Brian Reimer. And when they were born, they had a problem. Their foreskin was too big. They had a problem urinating. So they did a circumcision. And one of the little boys, they accidentally removed one of his penises. Think about this. This is 1965. They had no idea what to do. So Dr. John Money and the Hopkins team persuaded the parents that the sex reassignment would be the best in the baby's interest. At age of 22 months, Bruce went under a bilateral orchiectomy, and they made a vulva. and they raised little Bruce as Brenda, and they forced little Bruce to live life as Brenda. Think about this, guys. This is what they did in 1965, 1966. This is what happened. Dr. John Money convinced the world that gender was nature versus nurture. This is what he convinced the world. This is what it is, right? Claiming that a child's gender was construction through nurturing, not nature. He did the John Jones case, and he literally convinced the world. He was also very popular for the term intersex. You guys are familiar with the term intersex? Used to be called hermaphrodite. Do they still use that term here? All right. It used to be called hermaphrodite. The technical term for it is disorders of sex development, but we don't like the term disorders. We like to now use by the term differences. Or is that what you guys use? Right? But technically that is the term for it. And roughly makes up 1.7% of the world's population. And what intersex is, what used to be called hermaphrodite, what differences of sex development is, you could be born with both genitalia. You could be born with a penis and a uterus. Could be your chromosome count alone. Like I said, 1.7% of this room, of the world's population. So that looks like there's probably one, maybe two people in this room are born intersex, and you have no idea how many has ever had their chromosomes checked. I never have, and I've gone through all these transition. This is what it is, and who does this? So this is what I'm saying. It makes up of 1.7% of the world's population. And about 1% of all birth baby have some sort of ambiguous genitalia, such as a very large clitoris or a very small penis. And 0.1 to 0.2 is so ambiguous that they need to bring a doctor in. They don't understand if it's a boy or a girl. And that happened to my very best friend in the world. Her name is Peggy Lee Jones. She was born in 1949 in the United States of America. She came out of her mother's womb. She had both a penis and a vagina. The doctor looked at her, was stunned. Never seen this before. This is 1949. Almost dropped her. Says, you know what? Her penis is larger than her vagina. They stamped male on her birth certificate. They did 4 surgeries on her by the time she was 5 years old to fix that genitalia. They pumped her full of testosterone because doctors decided nature versus nurture. The way you raise a child is the way this child's going to become. They did 4 surgeries on her by the time she was 5 years old. Think about that. She didn't want to live the life of a boy. She wanted to live the life of a girl. So what did they do to fix her? When she was 9 years old, they strapped her to a table and did electric shock therapy on this 9-year-old child to fix her. Because society has said it is nature versus nurture. The way you raise a child is the way this child is going to become. Which brings me into this world. I was born Jeffrey Allen Butterworth, January 29th, 1965. I came out of my mother's womb. They looked at me and they said, this little child has a penis. So they stamped male on my birth certificate. Of course, I was too young. They couldn't ask me. This is 1965, right? But 1965, I'm pretty damn old. That was the first year the term transgender had ever been coined. Nobody knew the simple fact of what it meant to be transgender. It came out of Columbia University. We've had transgender people around as long. There's this stuff that's come back from 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years. There's even longer than that. But nobody understood it. This is 1965. We didn't have social media. We didn't have television. We didn't have a lot of magazines. And nobody understood that transgender people have a gender identity or gender expression that differs from the sex they were assigned at birth. Like I said, I was born a long, long time ago. But at this age, I wanted to look, act, dress, and live life as a girl, and that did not make sense. My mom was a Christian woman, and she said, Jeff, if you pray hard enough, God will move mountains. So I was literally at my hands and knees, begging God night after night, day after day, saying, God, please turn me into a girl. Please, God, I would cry myself to sleep. Every morning I'd wake up and I'm still a boy. And it was torture. It did not make sense. How do you tell your mom, your dad, your brothers, your sisters in 1968, 1969 that you want to live, look, be a girl? I would go to school with my very best friend. This is 1970. Here I am at 5 years old. Go to school with my very best friend, Michelle. After school, we'd go to her house and we'd play tea party. We played dolls, and I would dress up like her. This is somebody I could do it with. It did not make sense. This is 1970. How do you tell your mom? It was literally torture. I would literally cry and cry myself to sleep night after night, day after day. Did not make sense. This is 1970. It did not make sense. I literally felt so, quote, abnormal. These are the terms that I used to describe myself. I felt weird, strange. This is 1970, 1971. Why the hell do I want to look like a girl? We didn't have the term transgender, and these things ate me alive. I would cry and cry and cry. How do you tell your brothers, your moms, your sisters that you wanted to be the member of the opposite sex? I just wanted to be normal, like my brothers, like my sister. Like, you know what I'm saying? Not have these feelings of wanting to be a girl. Does that make sense? I just wanted to be normal. I was curious about this, so I said, what is normal? Curious about this, and I Googled it. Who determines what normal is? And deciding what is normal is usually based on statistics. A large group of people tested, and normal is a result of 95% of what those people show, which means that brings up discrimination. Discrimination, again, groups that are part of the marginalized community. The 5%. And this has been going on for a long, long time. You know, people have been discriminated against. I just came in from South Africa because of skin color. How many in this room are left-handed? When did you choose to be left-handed? Huh? You didn't, did you? Did you know that in some countries until the 1970s, Eastern Europe, maybe even Poland, parts of Eastern Europe, you would go to jail for being left-handed? Think about that, all right? For being left-handed. How about red hair? Does anybody know somebody with red hair? For generations, people were put to death because they were born with red hair. Especially in England, you were considered witches or warlocks. So as I said, people have been discriminated against since the beginning of time because of some being part of some marginalized group and being part of it. But today we're going to focus on the LGBT community, and we're going to focus on the letter T and what it means to be transgender. All right? And so, like I said, I appreciate you guys coming today. And one of the greatest ways we have found is by sharing our transgender stories. And I normally ask how many people in this auditorium know a transgender person. How many of you personally know a transgender person? I'm assuming everybody here does, right? You know, how many would you know that I'm transgender if you did not know? Nobody, right? You know, truthfully, I've slept with men that have no idea. I'm post-op, I've had my surgery, I've literally slept with men that have no idea in the world, right? Then I get my clothes on and say, by the way, my penis used to be twice as big as yours, and I run out the door. I'm just kidding. Did it one time. I'm just kidding. But like I said, most people have no idea, and I can guarantee you everybody, you know, there's a few hands that did go up, but I can guarantee you everybody knows a transgender person, but because of discrimination, we don't carry banners around that say, I am a transgender person. We just want to live our lives and blend in and just be part of who we are. Does that make sense to you, right? One of the greatest ways is by sharing stories, because it is hard to hate someone whose story you know. So today, for the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to share a little bit about myself. My name is Jessica Lynn, and this is my story. I'm one of 80 million people in the world. This is my story. Everybody has a different journey, a different path, a different life. Please do never compare, saying, I know one person, that means I understand the whole community. Everybody has a different identity. Does it make sense? You know, this is my story, my journey. And it began, like I said, in January 29, 1965. I was born a cute, adorable little baby boy. My mom and dad originally from England. They migrated to the United States, and they started to raise their family. And I was just a typical, normal, everyday boy that you wouldn't think two things about. I had 3 brothers and an older sister. Here I am with my 2 older brothers and my younger brother. But as I said, as far back as I can remember, I wanted to look, act, dress, and live life as a girl. 1969, 1970, that did not make sense. Begging God night after night, day after day, saying, God, please turn me into a girl. It's not happening. And life went on. It became harder and harder and harder. And I stopped praying to God. It just didn't work. And when I started praying, I'm saying, God, you cannot turn me into a girl. Take these goddamn feelings of wanting to be a girl away from me. It doesn't make sense to a child at 5, 6, 7 years old that I want to look, act, dress, and live life as an opposite gender. It did not make sense. But the feelings didn't go away. They just grew stronger and stronger and stronger. And life went on, became harder and harder and harder. It did not make sense. When I was about 7 years old here, and I learned the difference between boys and girls. Boys have a penis and girls have it. If I got rid of that penis, I'd be a girl. So at 7 years old, I snuck a razor blade into bed and physically tried to remove my penis. Think about that, guys. I literally tried to cut off my penis. That is very, very common in the older transgender community. A lot of us tried that, and it did not make sense. So I lived on a farm, and I started doing different coping mechanisms. Get up before school, milk the goats, feed the chickens, collect insects, do these different activities to stop me thinking about wanting to be a girl. Coping mechanisms. This is the way I escape reality. When I'm doing a different activity, reading a book, I'm not thinking about wanting to be a girl. This is very, very common. Then I found about 6, 7 years old that when I have a paintbrush in my hand, that became my next coping mechanism. And I started painting. And I'm painting paintings like this when I'm 6, 7 years old. So when I'm painting this flower for 2, 3, 4 hours, I am not thinking about wanting to be a girl. And it became the greatest coping mechanism in the world. And I had paintings all over my mom and dad's house. I had paintings all over their friend's house. And I'm becoming better and better and better. When I'm sitting at that eagle for 2, 3, 4 hours, I am not thinking about wanting to be a girl. And this became my greatest coping mechanism. Like I said, I became a pretty damn good artist. I painted this when I was 11 years old in one 6-hour sitting. Think about that. For that 6, maybe 7 hours, I was smelling that ocean. I was listening to those waves crash. I was escaping reality, listening to those birds. That was the way I escaped reality. And as I said, it's a very, very common thing with the older LGBTQ plus community. A lot of us did this. Well, as I told you, my parents were British immigrants. At a young age, my parents introduced me to the game of football. In America, we do call it soccer. They joined me in AYSO, American Youth Soccer Organization. And back then, I didn't want to play football because back then, girls didn't play, only boys did. But then when I found that I was on the field for 90 minutes trying to get that ball in that net, that became my next greatest coping mechanism. And I obsessed with it. And I started getting up before school, kicking the ball against the garage door, and practicing and practicing. When I'm on that field for 90 minutes, I am not thinking about suicide. I am not thinking about hurting myself. This was my escape from reality, and this is what I did. Studies have shown that 2/3 of transgender teens have depression. Many have suicidal thoughts, including myself. But I didn't have the term transgender. But research has proven that when you let a child live their true gender, it's no medical, no hormones. This one at the University of Texas and this one at the University of Washington in Seattle. I have pages of studies that says when you let a child transition at a young age, no medical, no hormone, you let a child live their true name, their true gender, depression tends to disappear. Equal or only slightly higher than siblings and cisgender peers. Think about this. But we didn't have the terms back then, so I played football 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and it became my escape from reality, and I became better and better and better. And this is the way I dealt with this turmoil that would eat me alive, night after night, day after day. I'm playing on a numerous different teams 7 days a week. This became my escape from reality. I became really good. I'm 15 years old here. This team was based out of California. We were so good. We were rated number 2 in the United States. I walked up a field once in California. I was offered 4 scholarships, and the 1984 Olympic team asked me to try out for the 1984 Olympic Games. That's how good of a player I was. Again, I love the sport, but back then it was a coping mechanism. I also discovered alcohol at a very young age. All my teammates were older than me. They're 18, 19 years old. They were able to buy beer. And every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, I was shit-faced. That was my next escape from reality. I turned to alcohol. Not drugs, but alcohol. And life went on. It became harder and harder. No understanding and just escaping by playing football 7 days a week. This is what I did. So when boys and girls are 15, 16, 17 years old, boys and girls start dating, right? That's that age. So when I was 17 years old, I didn't particularly like girls. I had crushes on every one of my teammates. Everyone except for Alberto. He was a good player, but shit, he was an asshole. But when I was 17 years old, I met a young girl named Barbara. Barbara was 15 years old. She was beautiful, she was kind, she was quiet. We started a friendship. I felt comfortable hanging around her. I could go to the mall and be with her, and I would live my life through her. When you're a young boy, you're 17 years old, you're constantly horny, the wind blows, your dick gets hard. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? When I made love to my girlfriend, I would do role reversal. I would pretend I was her to perform as her boyfriend. This is 1982. I didn't understand myself, but I felt I had to be open and honest and come out to her. So after being together for about 6, 7 months, we're lying in bed one night. I got my nerve up. I drank some beer and I turned to her and I said, Barbara, I need to tell you something. She looks at me with a big smile, thinking maybe she's going to a concert. And I said, I really need to tell you this. This is very difficult for me to say. She goes, you can tell me anything, Jeff. I love you more than life. One day, I want to be a girl just like you. This is 1982. Had no idea, no understanding. You can imagine. She pushes me away. She says, what the fuck did you just say, Jeff? I started crying, saying, I don't understand, Barbara. One day I want to be a girl just like you. I don't understand it. You can imagine how pissed she said, get the hell out of my house. Oh my God, I'm planning on spending the rest of my life with you. You faggot, you queer, just get the hell out of my house. This is 1982. Did I do the right thing? And I went home that night and I literally cried all night long. Did I do the right thing? I had no idea, no understanding. This is 1982. The next day was absolutely horrific. At 7 p.m. the next evening, the phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's Barbara. She goes, Jeff, we need to talk. Go to her house. I go up the staircase. I ring the doorbell. She opens the door, and she wraps her arms around me. She goes, I don't understand it, but I love and accept you for who you are. This is 1982. The only word we knew back then was transvestite. Maybe one day these feelings will go away. Cross-dresser is the term. I had no idea, no understanding. This is 1982. We were together constantly. This is me. She would let me dress up once in a while. She didn't care to see it, but she would let me dress up every once in a while. She accepted me for who I am. But now Barbara and I are inseparable. When you saw Jeff, you saw Barbara. When you saw Barbara, you saw Jeff. Maybe one day these feelings will go away. This is 1982 going to 1983. But we are together 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I have no idea and understanding. She accepted me for who I am. 1983 turns into 1984. I have the world at my fingertips. I start my sign painting business and everything's going absolutely fantastic. I have the world at my fingertips. I have somebody that loves me, accepts me. So on Christmas morning, 1984, I bought her beautiful half-carat diamond ring. And on Christmas morning, she's sitting between my legs, opening her presents. She opened her diamond ring, and I whispered in her ear, will you marry me? And she literally just burst out crying. Oh my God, Jeff, yes, I totally, totally love you. So now the year is 1985. I have the world at my fingertip. I have a successful sign painting business. We have our engagement party, and of course I have to have the monster truck, right? Monster truck, small penis. Mine wasn't small. But I was pretending to be somebody. This is 1985, and I'm wanting to transition more and more and more. Still had never heard of the term transgender. I started to throw a huge wedge in our relationship, and I'm drinking more, and I'm fighting with her. I'm not making love to her, and I'm wanting to live my life truthfully. This is 1985, and we're having a big problem. Finally, in about September of 1985, Barbara and I split up for about 5-6 days. I go to Los Angeles, go to nightclubs called La Cage Falls, female impersonators, kind of like drag queens now. Had no idea, no understanding. Go to the library, still had never heard of the word transgender. And after being apart for about 5-6 days, Barbara calls me crying, saying, Jeff, we need to talk. I go meet her, and she says, I'm not a lesbian, but if you need to live your life as a girl, I will stay with you. I love and accept you that much. This is 1985. Maybe one day these feelings will go away. I have no idea, no understanding. So we get back together. We start planning our lives. So it's Christmas time. It's 3 weeks before Christmas. It's December 5th, 1985. And I drop Barbara off at work this day in my monster truck, and I go home, and I'm typing up an estimate. And at 12 o'clock, Barbara calls me. She goes, hey, Jeff, I got out of work early. Come collect me. So I pick her up in my monster truck. We go to this little place in Reseda and have lunch together. It's 3 weeks before Christmas. We're eating fish and chips. We're talking about our wedding, talking about Christmas. Everything's fantastic. We leave there. We're driving down the street in my truck. I got a benchy. We're rocking out, got the music cranking. And we go past the store on the right-hand side. We're going to go Christmas shopping there tonight. It's Christmas time. It's 3 weeks before Christmas. And we turn right on the street called Winnetka. We're driving northbound. There's snow in the mountains. Beautiful, beautiful. like I said, a few weeks before Christmas, it was a gorgeous day. There was a guy hanging Christmas lights on the right-hand side. We come through this intersection on Winnetka and Sherman Way. As we come to this intersection, a lady high on heroin and drunk at 1 o'clock in the afternoon runs the red light at 65 miles an hour and broadside us right underneath Barbara's door. We rolled 2 times and a moving truck this size hit us head on head, where we rolled another 5 times. You can imagine how horrific that car accident was. That's me on the stretcher being put into the helicopter. During that helicopter flight to Northridge Hospital, I died several times in the helicopter. They broke my sternum, bringing me back to life. This is before they had the machines that would jolt your heart. They broke my sternum. I have a lump on my chest. I broke my neck, and my jaw was completely shattered. You can imagine how horrific that car accident was. So here we were 3 weeks before Christmas. I had the world at my fingertips. I have somebody that loves and accepts me. Boom, this car accident happens. We're airlifted to Northridge Hospital. I'm in a coma for about 2-3 days. 20 years old. I've never been to a funeral. I've never seen a dead body. The next time I get to see Barbara, she's laying in her white coffin, in her white dress. I'm literally screaming for her to wake up. My mouth is wired shut, and I'm literally crying. Please wake up, Barbara. You can imagine how fucking dark my life came from that moment on. The computer's a little bit screwed up here, but I don't know what happened. My life turned into an absolute living hell. You can imagine. You know what I'm talking about. I'm 20 now, turning 21 years old, and I turned to drugs and alcohol. Cocaine became my drug of choice. I would snort it, I would smoke it. I did anything I could to numb this pain. I attempted suicide 12, 14, 16 times. I had no idea and understanding, and my life had just completely fallen apart. I was skin and bones. I would just cry and cry and cry. To fix myself, I had no idea. This is 1986, going into 1987. I probably slept with 30, 40, 50 different women. Half the time I couldn't get an erection. I didn't understand myself. Maybe one day these feelings will go away. So my life had completely fallen apart. Until June of 1987. And in June of 1987, a friend of mine named Pat goes, "Hey Jeff, let's go to your mom and dad's house." It was prearranged, and he picks me up and down in Los Angeles. We drive up to the Central Valley of California to a place called Yosemite Lakes Park, which is a central part of California where my mom and dad had since retired. And I get up to my mom and dad's house, and I go to sleep on their couch for a few hours. And after a few hours, my mom wakes me. She goes, "Hey Jeff, I want to have a talk with you." So my mom and I walk down. We sit down on this rock overlooking this beautiful view. There's a picture from the back of my mom's house. We're sitting on this rock looking at this, and my mom turns to me. She said, "You know, your dad and I know you're drinking, and we want you to stop." I said, "Mom, I drink. I'm 23 years old. I drink, but I don't drink too much." And she said, "No, we know you're drinking. We know you're using drugs, and we know why." I said, "Mom, I drink. Maybe I'm drinking a little too much before Barbara's been dead. You have to understand that I'm not lying. I'm not using drugs. I'm lying to my teeth. And it'll stop, in a little while. It helps me sleep." She said, "No." That moment on the rock in June of 1987, my mom turned to me. She said, "Your dad and I know you drink. We know you're using drugs because we know you want to be a girl. We've known ever since you were 3, maybe 4 years old." I get up on that rock and I'm screaming at her. 23 years I've lived in hell and you and dad did nothing. I'm yelling at her. I'm crying. 23 years and you and dad did nothing. I walked down the bottom of the hill and I sat there and I cried and I cried and I cried. 23 years and my mom and dad did nothing. I was so pissed. I came back up. She's sitting on the rock crying, going, "Why, Mom? Why didn't you do anything?" She goes, "Simmer down, Jeff. I'll tell you." She's crying. I'm crying. She goes, "Your dad and I planned on transitioning you when you were 5 years old. In fact, your dad put a request in from work to move from Los Angeles to Riverside. And during that move, we moved from 4 boys, 1 girl, to 3 boys and 2 girls." I said, "Why didn't you? My life would have been so much easier." She said, "Well, in 1969, your dad and I took you to UCLA. There was a very famous doctor working there. He was doing a stint. He was writing a book, and his name was Dr. John Money." Remember Dr. John Money? You guys remember Dr. John Money from the beginning. He's very famous for these 2 little boys. So Dr. John Money convinced my mom and dad, Jeff is a boy. Nature versus nurture. The way you raise this child is the way this child's going to become. So Dr. John Money convinced my mom and dad through literature that it is nature versus nurture, that the way this child is going to become is what they're going to do. So my parents took the advice of Dr. John Money, moved me away from Michelle, and did exactly what they told them to do. They immersed me, my parents immersed me in sports. This is what Dr. John Money convinced my mom and dad. But what the problem was, is Dr. John Money continued telling the world that this case was a huge success, but the reality was far more complicated. At age 2, Brenda anally tore off her dress as she refused to play dolls and would beat up her brother and seize his toy cars and guns. In school, she relentlessly teased for her masculine gaits, taste, and behavior. She complained to her parents that she felt like a boy. This is what little Brian was Brenda felt like, right? Finally, seen a psychologist. The psychologist convinced mom and dad to let the little boy know. And so David now changed his name to David and started his detransition into who he was truly meant to be. He had a very, very difficult time. He went through a lot of depression. He detransitioned, he had double mastectomy, and he attempted suicide twice. He had a very, very difficult time in life. He went through a marriage, had a very difficult time. One day, he went into his garage, found a shotgun, cut off the barrel, put it in his mouth, and took his own life. It's a very, very famous case. You're familiar with David Reimer, right? So Dr. John Money to the transgender community is considered the devil. He didn't just do this to me. He didn't just do this to David Reimer. He convinced the world that his case was a huge success. And this begs the question, is gender identity nature and innate, like Dr. Johnny would have led us to believe, or is it entirely based on culture and nurturing factors? Well, research has proven, this one just study out of Johns Hopkins that shown that gender identity is almost entirely based on nature and is almost exclusively predetermined before the birth of the baby. Think about that, right? So this is what it is. So I came out to my parents in June of 1987, but back then we didn't have the word transgender, still had no idea, no understanding, did not know how to identify, did not know what to do. And I went through a few years, do I transition? Yes, no, yes, no. But back then was the last time I needed a coping mechanism. Right then and there was the last time I ever took a sip of alcohol or any type of drug. I've been 100% sober ever since that moment of the rock in June of 1987. I don't need that coping mechanism. I drop acid on Fridays, but that's something different. I'm just kidding. Fridays, no, I'm just kidding. I don't do any drugs, I'm just kidding. Like I said, in 1987, the only term we knew was transvestite. And that's considered a very negative term under the transgender umbrella. It's more of a cross-dresser. In some countries, it doesn't even fit under the transgender umbrella, but that's the term for cross-dresser. Then I found the term transsexual is more of a medical term. It's somebody that wants to completely transition between genders. It's a very contentious word in some parts of the world because some people think that they're above somebody else because they're transsexual. And that's somebody that wants to live completely opposite of the gender that they're born. Then I started finding out more and more about the transgender community. Facebook alone right now has 64 terms that falls under the transgender umbrella. Different countries. Poland has its own terms. I just came in from South Africa, it has its own term. I've been in Japan, Japan has its own term. Different countries have their own terms. But it's also a very fluid community. Just like sexuality and gender, they're both fluid. I know people that had no idea they're transgender until 40, 50, 60 years old. You study this stuff, you know what I'm talking about. People have no idea sometimes and find out later in life. But in 1987, there was no such word as transgender. I had no idea where to look for it, so I went through a few years. Yes, no, yes, no. Now we're getting the late 80s, and the computer's starting to come out. There are doctors, there are surgeons, but it's very, very costly. I didn't have the money, so I wanted to do my surgery. So I found a construction job down in Southern California, started living with one of my brothers, working, finding I wanted to raise $40,000 American dollars to do my transition. I wanted my surgery. That was very important for me for my transition to have my surgeries. And I didn't have the money. So I took this construction job, living with one of my brothers, getting skinny, letting my hair grow, hammering nails, starting to plan my transition. I'm a contractor, and one day I walked in this lumberyard, and this young girl behind the counter, she looks at me, she goes, "Hey, Jeff." I said, "Do I know you?" She says, "I'm Rachel. I'm Charles Hill's sister." I knew her brother. We sat at the counter, talked. She goes, "Want to go hang out?" And I said, "Yeah." So we went out, we exchanged phone numbers, and we hung out. I told you I felt comfortable hanging around girls. The second day I hung out with her, I told her what I was doing. She goes, She became the third person I came out to. She goes, I'll help you transition. She'd go to the mall with me, buy shoes. She'd do my lipstick, paint my fingernails, do my makeup, teach me how to walk, do this kind of stuff. She became my friend. She'd take photographs of me. She became my friend. She'd go, you know what, Jeff? Sleep with me. You're a boy, I'm a girl. Sleep with me. We all get horny. I slept with her a couple times, right? And I remember the first time I slept with her, I pretended she was her brother. He's an ugly motherfucker. Things are moving along, getting boxes of clothing. She's working with me. She's helping me. Then one day she calls me saying, Jeff, we need to talk. And I said, what's up, Rachel? She says, I'm pregnant. We go meet. Through a long 2-3 week conversation, she says, no, I will not have an abortion. You people live your life as a woman at your mom and dad's, and I'll raise this child on my own. We spoke about it. I said, I cannot let a child come in this world without a father. We'll put my transition aside. I'll do it later on. We spoke about it. Put my transition aside. Rachel and I got married March of 1991. She was several months pregnant. August 18th, 1991, along comes Jeffrey Daniel Butterworth. I worked my ass off. I did not have medical insurance, so it cost me over 5,000 American dollars just to give birth to. I was also the kind of father that did not want my child to be raised by a babysitter, which meant that she stayed at home with our child. And now I am the perfect father. I'm not the greatest husband because I rarely slept with her, but I was the absolute perfect father. Come home, working 6 days a week, come home Sunday, go to Costco, go to the park. I am the absolute perfect father. Like I said, I rarely slept with her. But she'd wake me up at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, insist on sex. Once in a while, she got pregnant a second time. Right? Very fertile. Bradley was a difficult child to give birth to. She was 7 months pregnant with Bradley when her and Jeffrey were in another car accident. Bradley cost me over $8,500 just to give birth to. He was a difficult child to give birth to. So now I had 2 beautiful little boys at home, stay-at-home mom, and I am working my ass off to make ends meet. The Northridge earthquake happens in Los Angeles. We move closer to the valley so I can be closer to my kids while I'm working, and the relationship between me and their mother is falling farther and farther apart. When I come home, I'm just playing ball with the children. I'm coloring with them. Rachel and I are in separate bedrooms. The relationship is completely falling apart. We're only together for the kids. Finally, I come home one day. She says, you know what, Jeff, F you. You haven't slept with me in 6 weeks. Takes the 2 boys, moves out of the house, and files for divorce. Did not fight with her, did not argue with her. The relationship wasn't there. During this divorce, the judge ordered joint legal physical custody. I had my boys every other day. The judge also ordered me to pay $650 American dollars for child support. I doubled it. I did not want my 2 boys going to public school, so I gave her $1,300 a month for my children. So now my children, I had them every other day. On my time off, I'm going to nightclubs, dressed as Jessica, and exploring my sexuality, learning a little bit about it. And I had a really good relationship with her mother. What kind of ex-husband doubles X was child support? I took her to a couple of concerts. I knew the lighting director. She said, set me up with him, Jeff, and I did. I was telling her what I'm doing. I'm exploring my sexuality. And we were better friends than we were this, we're co-parents on different parts of the houses. So things are moving along, and I'm exploring my sexuality, going to nightclubs. Now we're at Christmas 1998. My son Jeffrey on the telephone Christmas Eve, and I said, so have you got a beautiful Christmas tree? He goes, Mom never got one. In America, Christmas trees are extremely important. I said, put your mom on the phone. She gets on the phone. I said, I have a Christmas tree. She said, I never had time to get one. I said, it's Christmas Eve. Let me bring one over for the boys. She said, absolutely. So on Christmas Eve, my 2 boys are decorating this Christmas tree. You can imagine they're on cloud 12,009. Mom and Dad are here getting along. Santa Claus is coming tonight. I said, Rachel, let me spend the night on the couch to watch the kids open their presents from Santa Claus. She said, absolutely. She goes, I'm not feeling well anyhow. She goes to bed. I wait for my kids to get tired. I tuck them into bed. They fall asleep. I go to my car, get the presents from Santa Claus, stuff them in the Christmas tree, and I go to sleep on the couch. Around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I look up and Rachel's waking me. She goes, hey, Jeff, it's Christmas. Come to bed with me. We all get horny. The wind blows. One time, told you I was fertile. Most adorable little redhead comes into our lives. We get back together. We did not remarry, but we got back together. We said, let's raise our 3 boys together. She's more open and accepting to me ever than before. So now we buy a small house in a place called Reseda. She's working, I'm working. The economy's climbing. We sell the house. We move up the coast to the central coast of California. She's working, I'm working. And the house comes on the market. Rich goes, hey, Jeff, let's put our money together, buy this house. So we paid $332,000 for this 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. The day we closed escrow, Rachel called her boss, quit her job, and says, I want to go back to school full-time, become a dental hygienist. I said, that's fine, but I got 3 boys, no medical insurance. I have 2 car payments, massive mortgage payment. That means I have to work my ass off. So she literally quit her job, and I'm literally now working 7 days a week, roughly 16 to 18 hours a day to make up that lost income. And the relationship between me and their mother is starting to fall farther and farther apart. Finally, I come home after owning this home for 3-4 months. She says, you know what, Jeff? F you. You haven't slept with me in ages. You're sleeping on the couch every night. But this time, she took our youngest son, Curtis, and moved out of the house. She said, you raise Jeffrey and Bradley, I will raise Curtis, and moved 100 miles south. I begged her, I said, you do not split up children, they're brothers. She said, you live your life, I'll live my life. I will pay you, I will put you in an apartment, I will rent you a house. You do not split up brothers, they're brothers. She said, you have your boyfriend, I'll have my boyfriend. And moved 100 miles south, I don't want to see you. So in turn, I gave her $40,000 for her portion of the house, and I filed for custody for all 3 boys, which started a 3-year legal battle that cost me $65,000 American dollars. During this 3-year legal battle, my middle son was about 11 years old and diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. He'd be in the back of the classroom, stand up and bark out cuss words. He had Tourette syndrome. And she told the judge that his father doesn't spank him, he needs to be spanked, when I had 2 diagnoses of Tourette syndrome. During this 3-year custody battle, she said, I want a full psychiatric evaluation. The judge orders an evaluation. The evaluator says to me, so Jeff, I want to live life as a woman? I was truthful. I said, yes, I do. I was told not to lie. Are you attracted to men? Yes, I am. I did not lie. Rachel goes in there and says she found pictures of him wearing women's clothing. Remember, she was the one that took the pictures. She stuck them in sleeves of record albums to keep them from me. When she asked him about it, he admitting to wanting to live life as a woman. She was very concerned. I had a secret life going on. So this court battle lasts 3 years, $65,000 with all this documentation in front of her. The judge says, in all my years, this is the most difficult case I've ever decided. But in all my years on the bench, I've never seen such an incredible and caring father. And right then and there, gave me full legal physical custody of all 3 boys. So now I had 3 young boys. We all living together. During this custody battle, the judge orders her to pay me child support. Never took a penny. It was nothing to do with money. I just want our boys to live together. During this custody battle, she said the judge says when she visits the children, she spends 1 night a week in a hotel to not disrupt the children's life. She started doing that. Then one weekend she says, can I take Jeffrey and Curtis to visit Grandma down in Southern California? I said, absolutely. My son Bradley and I are working on the table, saw Santa Maria. Several hours later, the phone rings. Another car accident. Curtis and his mother were broadside. The car flipped several times and they airlifted to UCLA. By the time we get down there, they released my son to me. He was in his car seat. He had a scratch on his back, and their mother's in critical condition. She had internal hemorrhaging. She was in hospital for about 8 days, and the doctor says when she gets out, she has to be bedridden for about a month. She can come stay with us. She's got the kids there to help her. She starts staying with us. She starts saying, Jeff, let's work it out. Let's be a family again. Let's get back together. Ain't that stupid? During a long 3, maybe 4-week conversation, I said, no, Rachel, I need to transition. I need to do it. She said, let me back in the house. I will help you and we'll do it together as a family. So we started making arrangements. We started working together. She says, you have all my 100% support. She says, all I ask is that we wait till Curtis is a little bit older, till he's 12 years old. We tell Jeffrey and Bradley, all I ask is we wait till Curtis is a little bit older. He's too young to understand as bad as Dad's transition. When Jeffrey graduates high school, she graduates medical school. She will take the kids to Plano, Texas to be near her sister while I stay behind in California, finish up some work and start planning my transition. We're working together. We made agreements. We're talking about it. She's helping me. She's on the computer with hormones. She's making an appointment with surgeons. The time comes. She graduates. Jeffrey graduates. We load the whole house of belongings. They move to Plano, Texas. Well, I stay behind in California, finish off some work and start my transition. I went through some really rough times, but I finally made up my mind I have to do it. Flew to Texas to be with my family in Christmas 2009. I had started my transition. I wasn't living openly yet. I was on my hormone replacement. And I came out to my eldest son, Jeffrey, during my trip to Texas in 2009. He says, you know what, Dad, you've always been there for me. You have my 100% support. It's not going to be easy. you have my 100% support. About 6 weeks later to 2 months, during long phone conversations, I came out to my middle son. He was 17 years old. He says, you know what, Dad, you've always been there for me. You're going to look a little bit different, but you have my 100% support. The day after Christmas, I took my youngest son, Curtis, down the street. I said, I'm going away for a little while. He's going, why, Dad? He said, I'm a phone call away. Don't worry about it. Your mom and I have made arrangements. It was the most difficult decision I ever made, but their mothers fully supported me. She goes, this is all I asked, Jeff, is we wait till Curtis is a little bit older. We wrote agreements on it. Came back to spring of 2010, threw away all my boy clothes, and I started living as Jessica for the first time in my life. The thought of suicide never entered my mind again. But I was not comfortable with me penis still between my legs. I wanted my surgery. People would literally point at me, laugh at me, ridicule me. The thought of suicide never entered my mind again. I wanted my surgery. I needed my surgery. I found my surgeon, Dr. Marcy Bowers. Through her, she gave me a surgery date of January 2011. We bumped it up till September 17, 2010. I flew to this little tiny place called Trinidad, Colorado. It used to be called Sex Change Capital of the World. During a 7.5 hour surgery, Dr. Marcy Bowers turned my penis into my vagina, gave me my breast implants, and does what's called a trach shave, cut off my Adam's apple. That was the day I became me. It was one of the most phenomenal moments of my life. During this procedure, Dr. Bauer says, unpacked me, took 13 yards of gauze out of my new vagina. She says, you cannot have sex for 6 weeks. Now it's 12 weeks. If you go to Dr. Bauer, she'd say 12 weeks before you can have sex. But back then it was 6 weeks. I said, I don't have a boyfriend, and who's going to sleep with me, right? Wasn't really concerned with it. That was the last thing in my mind. At 5 weeks, I go to this rental yard, talking to this guy behind the counter. I'm renting something. I come home and my phone rings. Hey, Jessica, this is Jerry from the rental yard. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, do you want to go out? I said, you know, I'm transgender. He goes, transmission, transgender, you're hot. I'm like, you're high. So Jerry and I went out that night. We messed around a little bit. I said, you want to be my first? And he said, yeah. So I made love for the first time in my life correctly 6 weeks in a day after my surgery. Right position, right body part, cute Hispanic guy. It was unbelievable. Tattoos, unshaven. It was a dream come true. It was unbelievable. Would have been the best sex I ever had if he lasted more than 15 seconds. But you can just see different pictures of different, as I transition, you can just see the transition periods of the no more hair extensions, no more wigs. Starting to look a little bit better over time. Transgender people, we explore clothing, we explore makeup, and it's very, very common in the transgender community. We explore of how we look and do this kind of stuff. Now my son Jeffrey and I are sharing a condo in California. Him and his girlfriend in one room, I'm in another. My son Bradley's back and forth to Texas. Jeffrey's back and forth to Texas, and everything is fantastic. I'm on the phone with my youngest son 3, 4, 5 times a day. And you can just see over time, less and less makeup, less jewelry, and this is just kind of where we are. This picture was taken 2 weeks after my last facial feminization. Dr. Beck in California, 2 weeks before this picture, took my head, pulled the skin down, took all the bone of my forehead, took fat out of my belly, and put in my cheeks. It was a $21,000 American dollar surgery he did for free. He says he's becoming popular. Promote me, Jessica. So Dr. Joel Beck, no, I'm just kidding. So this made the front cover of a human sexuality textbook out of Berlin, Germany. My stories and a number of textbooks around the world. They teach it at Columbia Law School. My story has actually changed the law in Hyderabad, India. There's one out of Cambridge University, one coming out of the University of Florida. So it's in a number of textbooks around the world. One coming out of the University of Washington in Seattle. So this is where we are now in the year 2022. What do I look like now? Have I bored any of you? A little bit?
No.
Okay. Now we're getting to the meat of the story. We won't be much longer. I know we had a little hiccup because of the computer. We're going back to 2012. My son Jeffrey and I are sharing a con together. Him and his old girlfriend, she's gone. She's no longer with her, so I cut her out of the picture. This is his new girlfriend, Olga, and he's bringing her to England to spend Christmas with us, and he's taking her to Barcelona on New Year's Eve to propose to her. So we're sharing a condo. My son Bradley's back and forth, but we're going back to 2012. My youngest son is now 12 years old. It's time we tell him this is the arrangement me and their mother made. So I start calling Rachel, saying, Rachel, it's time we tell Curtis. Suddenly she cuts off all phone communication. I'm emailing her, there's no response. I'm texting her, there's no response. Jeffrey can't get hold of his mother nor his brothers. What the hell is going on? I can't get hold of my children, I have no idea. I buy a plane ticket to fly to Texas. Before that plane ticket arrives, I receive a letter from the state of Texas. Rachel Butterworth, my child's mother, has filed suit to strip my parental rights. My choice of a lifestyle is dangerous to our youngest child. I flip out. I start calling attorneys saying, I have full legal physical custody. We have an agreement. Every attorney saying 300, 400, 500,000 American dollars. I'm saying, this is bullshit. I have custody. They're saying, this is Texas, Jessica. Finally, I find an attorney named John McCall. He says, I know her attorney uses an open and shut case. Literally, I know her attorney. You have full legal physical custody. You have an agreement. Wire me $2,000. Me and my attorney go in front of Judge Scott Becker during this long day of court. My attorney comes in there, goes, Jessica and Rachel have an agreement. When Curtis is 12 years old, Judge Scott Becker would not allow one word of that documentation in the courtroom. During this long day at court, my attorney comes in and goes, Jessica had come anytime the last 2 years to take us Curtis home. She doesn't want to take Curtis back to California. She's fine with them living here. She just wants to be part of this. She just wants to be part of the family again. She has full legal physical custody of all three boys. Judge Scott Becker says, not any longer, she doesn't. During this long day at court, her attorney says, we are asking for a full psychiatric evaluation done by Dr. Ben Albritton. This is the actual court transcript. They ask you for a certain specific doctor. During this long day at court, the judge goes 2 orders. You're allowed to speak to your child via the telephone, but if you tell your child that you have transition, you don't have to worry about forking over any money. I'm going to come to California and throw you in jail if you tell your own child that you have transition. He says, second order. It is ordered that Dr. Ben Albritton is to do a full psychiatric evaluation on Jessica at her cost. This is a court order. If I do not do this, I go to jail. They give me his business card. I walk outside and I start calling him, said, I'm here in Texas now. Let's start this evaluation. The secretary calls me back several hours later and says, the soonest we can do it is the first Monday after Thanksgiving. And it's 3,000 American dollars. So I fly back to California, wire me $3,000. I pay for my car rental, I pay for my hotel, pay for my flight, and I Google Dr. Ben Albritton. It's the very first thing that pops up in the internet. This is who the judge ordered if I'm ever going to see my child again. My attorney calls the judge and says, can we have a different evaluator? The judge says, no, this is who's going to tell your client if she ever sees her child again. Still not able to talk to my child, had to file a contempt of court case, and I go to visit him. During a long day at court, the long day in the court, what was I going to say? I'm sorry. This is the judge. This is the evaluator. He goes to Biola. He's a graduate from Biola University, and this is what the university says on their intranet. This is Biola University. Similarly, do not affirm attempts to change one's biological birth. This is where the evaluator graduated from. I finally go to visit him. During the way there, I stop by my attorney's office and he says, do not talk about men. They hate homosexuality. Be honestly open and truthful. I go to downtown Dallas. I walk in, several days of huge investigation, evaluation. At the end of the 2 days, he goes, I need names of 10 to 15 people. I said, here's my phone, take whoever you want. And I come back to California. He starts calling all my friends. How many men has Jessica been with? How often do you see Jessica with men in front of her kids? That was all his concern was. And like I said, now we're getting the end of January. I'm calling my attorney saying, John, where the hell's this evaluation? My attorney's all leave it alone. I said, fuck you. On January 30th, I started calling the evaluator. Came back and said, you have a difficult case, it costs you an extra $1,500, and I finally got the evaluation back. Dated January 31st in the interest of Curtis Butterworth. Concerns about parent neglect by Miss Lynn were not substantiated the information on this evaluation. On the contrary, collateral sources describe me as a devoted, conscientious, and caring parent. It is recommended that Miss Lynn participate in individual psychotherapy during the reunification with her son, Curtis. This right-wing evaluator came back and said, I am actually the better parent. I should start seeing my child immediately. My attorney goes, you've done it, Jessica. You jumped through every goddamn hoop. Tomorrow, I will call her attorney and the judge to see when you can see your child again. Took them 2.5 weeks to get together for a 5-minute phone call. 2.5 weeks later, my attorney calls me. I said, when do I see my son, John? He goes, it's not that easy. They're fighting their own evaluation, and the judge is allowing it. He says it's going to cost you another $200,000 to $400,000 to ever speak to your child again. I said, I've had 2 evaluations. I've had full custody. I want to see my child. And it just did not make sense. I had no idea what to do. I was desperate. My attorney goes, I need another $20,000, and I had no more money. I had no understanding what to do. Finally, my attorney pulls himself off the case. I was devastated. I had no more money. Still not able to talk to my child. I had no idea what to do. Well, my little brother was a family rights attorney. He goes, ask for a final court date. I will work with you. Spent several months working on my case. We go into court and said, here's your court-ordered evaluation. Judge Scott Becker would not allow one word of it. During this long day of court, Rachel gets on the stand, swears under oath, I never knew Jeff wanted to be a woman. We pull out an LA Superior Court document that says she knew. The judge said, not admitted. This is an LA document. It's not allowed in Texas. During this long day of court, the judge goes, go home and I'm going to email you my answers. I said, no, I phoned here one way. I've had 2 evaluations. I want to see my child. The judge goes, don't disrespect the court. My son, go sit down. So we flew home that Monday night. That Friday, Jessica, Lynn, your parental rights have been terminated. This judge told me and my little boy, because I'm transgender, we're never allowed to speak to each other. I am never allowed to send my little boy a Christmas card. Never allowed to say, happy birthday, Curtis. Good night, Curtis. I love you, Curtis. I'm never allowed to speak to my little boy ever again. This is the United States of America in the year 2013. Wrap your head around this. Because I am who I am, this judge said I'm never allowed to be with my little boy ever again. I want you to wrap your head around this. This is August 2012. Same time my court case was going on. 31 states across the United States of America allow rapists custody and visitation rights. Wrap your head around this. They call it legitimate rape. In majority of states, attackers are afforded the same rights as other fathers. Any one of you women in the United States of America were raped and you did not abort that child, that rapist can get out of fucking jail and get custody. And this includes the state of Texas at the exact same time. In the state of Texas, a fucking rapist has more rights than I do because he is not transgender. A rapist in the United States of America. But because I am transgender, this judge stripped all of my parental rights because I am who I am. I want you to wrap your head around this. Man who raped 12-year-old girl awarded joint custody of that child. Please wrap your head around this in the United States of America. My paperwork went everywhere. Nothing. Later that year on Christmas Eve, I come home from work, and there in the mailbox, a yellow envelope from her attorney to Jessica Lynn. I'm going, what the hell is this? There's the stamp on the envelope, Saturday, 21st of December. I'm sitting in my car, Christmas Eve, I open it. Dated December 20th, this is a letter. Please find an enclosed copy of the order of termination. They mailed this to me on Christmas Eve to say, fuck you, Jessica. You will never have a Christmas with your little boy. Merry Christmas. This is Christmas Eve, so I'm sitting in my car reading this, crying, going, why would they do this? Why on Christmas Eve? Why would they do this? They didn't stop there. Page 4 of that same document, it is ordered that my name be removed from my child's birth certificate. It was signed and dated September 20th, but they waited to say, according to the United States government, this judge went as far as removing my name of my child's birth certificate because I'm transgender. Wrap your head around this because I am who I am. I had full legal physical custody. I had an arrangement with their mother, but because I am who I am, this judge stripped my parental rights. My case went all across the United States. Later that year, I'm driving down the street, my phone rings and it says Washington, D.C., and I pick it up. And the lady says, my name is so-and-so, the Department of Justice. We've done a huge investigation into your case. This judge was way out of line. He crossed every T, dotted every line, but he cannot take your name off your child's birth certificate. I sent her the paperwork, and it turns out that this is the first and only time in U.S. history that a biological parent with a supportive, active role has been erased from a child's birth certificate. Wrap your head around this. The first time in U.S. history that this has ever happened. This became my tipping point. the point at which a series of small changes or incidents becomes enough to cause a larger, more important change. I started telling my story across California, community colleges, high schools, churches, and it grew and it grew. And I went across the United States. I spoke at Harvard, at Yale, Stanford, Florida, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, and it grew and it grew and it grew. Came to England. I spoke at University of Oxford, Cambridge. Now I've literally spoken in 28 countries across the world. I've traveled over 1 million miles. I've lectured close to 2,000 times. The students that I'm reaching here, you guys, are the next generation. They're the next teacher, the next parent, the next leaders in the world. If we can open up their mind, this is the way we can make a better world for everybody. I do a huge amount of work. As I said, I speak a lot in South Africa. South Africa, I had the honor of speaking on the same stage Nelson Mandela used to lecture from. Nelson Mandela has the most powerful statement ever written. Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. So as we come to a close, I want you to think about this big, giant, beautiful planet that we all live on. Right now on this big, beautiful planet, there are 7,800,000,000 of us. Wrap your head around that number. For me to count to that number, I have to start counting 1, 2, 3, and it would take me 250 years to get to that number, 7,800,000,000 of us. And yet, no two of us are the same. Each of us have our own journey, our own story, our own lives. You could clone my DNA upon my long lost twin, but there will never be another me, and there will never be another you. Let's make this world a better, beautiful place, which brings us to the most beautiful statement ever written. The beauty of the world lies in the diversity of its people. Each and every single one of us has our own journey, our own path, our own life. Let's celebrate that together, because this is the way we make the world a better, more beautiful place.